It's Tuesday, the 3rd of February 2015. My name's Robin Yellow, and this is another edition of Ecotastic. And with me, as he is every week, is Dr. Kit Knowles.
Not a doctor.
Not quite, no.
No. Just I stopped at masters. My post-doctorate type education is relatively thin on the ground, must be said.
Well, maybe you could become a doctor one day.
Okay, yeah, maybe one day. My mum would be so proud.
Well, yes, exactly. And why not? Well, you're certainly a doctor to me. Il Professore. We're going to have to come up with some kind of grandiose title for you, which I think projects to our viewers the intellect and the deep knowledge that you have of the green field.
Well, thank you very much.
And we're making you feel good now.
Yeah, definitely. The pump is attached to the head, and it is inflating. So 2 weeks we've been away, haven't we? And we're back 2 weeks later. So there's tons of news, right?
Yeah, we've been off, as I say, for 2 weeks. So therefore, we're going to, if it's okay with you, Kit, this week, abandon Tech Corner and just do a mega news show.
Mega news show, love it.
Okay, great, fantastic. We've got some super news, so let's start with that right now. This first article is from Tree Hugger. Cheap oil can't kill solar, so calm down. Now, Tree Hugger report this week, was it this week? Yeah, this week, that Tom Randall of Bloomberg has posted a good summary of 7 reasons why cheap oil can't kill solar. Now, as you all know, we're experiencing a period of very cheap oil because of the overproduction of the OPEC cartel, therefore, there I said it. But Tom Randall reminds us in these 7 points that photovoltaic energy doesn't compete with oil. Therefore, don't worry about it. Just because oil's cheap doesn't mean our PV is going to end. And here is 7 reasons. 1, the sun doesn't compete directly with oil, at least not all that much. I'm not quite sure what he's getting on there, so I'm going to gloss over that one and move on to point 2, which is electricity prices are still going up. Now, Kit, you and I noticed the cost of petrol, gasoline at the pumps is going down because the feedstock for petrol, which is crude oil, is reducing in cost. It's gone down 50% in the last 6 months, but electricity prices don't seem to be tracking. Why is that?
Well, effectively, electricity, first of all, is a premium fuel. It's also not just made up of any one source of fuel, and it's got other stresses and strains on it in terms of the national grid, in terms of maintenance of continuous, matching the supply to demand. So all in all, there is a lot less change on that basis, and I think what they'll be doing is I mean, you can only hope that they'll be swallowing some of the extra money that they'll be getting now by maintaining higher prices to maintain a more sort of steady curve in terms of the price of electricity projected forward. Because effectively, all we're seeing at the moment is a blip. It is an economical phenomenon introduced by, well, you called it the cartel, by OPEC, that those guys have caused this. It is because they are worried about the divestment in the petrochemical industry. They're worried about the success in nationalization of energy in America and the kind of the push of fracking to movement into unconventional oil sources drives a lot of power away from them. So there's a lot of strong reasons why they want to flex a few of their extremely large petrochemical muscles and really teach everybody a bit of a lesson. But it is a short-lived thing. They can't maintain it. The demand that the world has on energy is going up. The availability and ease in which we can get hold of that is going down, and all of that is completely detached from what is right and what we should be achieving in terms of the climate, which is
well, interesting enough, OPEC can do this for as long as they like, because of course the world's largest reserves of oil are in Saudi Arabia and the OPEC countries, so they control 60% of the world's oil. So they could put everybody out of business, a bit like Canon put everyone out of business in the 1980s by dumping cheap photocopiers into Europe. But let's move on. The third point that Tom Randall makes about solar prices are still going down. I assume he's talking about photovoltaics here. And he references an article which says that some analysts predict a further 40% fall in solar prices in the next 2 years. Is it just market forces driving that price down, Kit?
There's absolutely some technological movement as well, improvement in efficiencies, improvement in manufacturing, and all that sort of culminating into you requiring less panels on your roof to achieve the same output, and all of that's usually capped by the feed-in tariff in any given country, because most people don't find it economical to install above that level. But also, so you've got the streamlining of the manufacturing, but also the substitution as well. People are playing heavily with the idea of swapping out the sort of materials of construction to bring down cost in those panels. So I think he's possibly a little pushing it a little bit with 40%, because of course, as with most of these technological curves, you find that you pick the low-hanging fruit first. So we sort of flashed up a graph, I think quite a few shows back now, about the drop in the cost of photovoltaics, and it was staggering, and he's expecting a further 40% fall on that.
Well, of course, a lot of that was driven by oversupplying the market at a point when there are a lot of very generous tariffs around the world. This further 40% cut is probably, as you say, advances in technology. He goes on to say, point 4, sales of plug-in vehicles are doing fine. I told you so, he says, and I have an electric car, and I see more and more of them on the road. You know, when you own a car and then you suddenly start seeing other cars of the same type. I see lots of Nissan Leafs around the place simply because I own one. But
I saw my first Prius Plus, which is the 7-seater Prius, yesterday, other than mine, on the road. So I agree with you there. It's definitely moving in that way, the hybrids and the plug-in electrics.
Yeah, pump prices haven't dropped as much as oil prices. So actually a direct reduction in the cost of a barrel of oil doesn't mean that petrol is any cheaper. Why is that, Kit?
Well, you've got a tax buffer in there, so it doesn't change how much the government is siphoning off. So you're not gonna any swing in the crude price is gonna be buffered against that. Not to mention also you're not buying crude oil, you're buying a refined product. So there's a good portion of the value of the petrol that you're buying is going into the refining process.
Oil prices won't stay this low forever, and we've already talked about the mechanisms which keep oil prices low. Cartel. And finally, number 7, global investment in clean energy keeps flowing. Now, of course, there are a lot of government schemes, a lot that we've talked about on this show, for investing in clean tech. Specifically in Europe, there's a lot of government incentives and tax breaks for the production of wind turbines, hydro energy in Austria and in Norway. And also other technologies like geothermal energy, of course, which gets, again, a good tax break because it's one of those energy sources which is super low carbon and is good for your tax credits.
Robin, just a clarification there. When you're talking about geothermal, are you referring to heat pumps there in terms of ground source heat pumps?
No, I'm talking about a geothermal power plant which goes... Okay,
you're talking Icelandic style. Yeah, fine, no worries. Just wanted to make sure people are aware that a heat pump, ground source heat pump, I meet client time and again who thinks that that heat pump or ground source heat pump is a form of geothermal technology. It is not. What you're talking about there is a effectively free form of energy which is derived from very hot spots around the planet in specific geological locations that we can tap into, which is, I'm fully for it. I think it's an excellent technology.
Yep, thanks for the clarification, Kit. Next article is from gov.uk. We've got so much news to get to, we're going to have to move at a bit more speed.
Yeah.
The World is a press release from the UK government. The world can cut carbon emissions and live well. Released on the 28th of January 2015 by the Department of Energy and Climate Change. It states that cutting carbon emissions to limit global temperatures to a 2 degrees rise can be achieved whilst improving living standards, a new online tool shows. Now, Kit, you've read this article from the UK government. What's it about?
Yeah, I mean, all they've done is they've created a tool, and when you fiddle around with the levers on that tool, you can create a scenario by which, with the correct mix of approach that you have in terms of energy and legislation, you can move into an environment which is going to achieve the 2-degree centigrade rise maximum. And we are still going to improve our living standards going forward. So I guess what they're saying is that we can achieve, we can get a piece of a pie, and what is the phrase, the cake and eat it, because we're going to be able to.
You can eat your cake and have it.
And no, it's definitely not that.
It is definitely that, because the reason why is you eat your cake and then you still have it. So the phrase is you eat your cake and have it. Whereas if you have your cake and eat it, well, that's what everybody does when they have cake. Come on, Kit.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Look at that. We are absolutely on fire tonight, Robin. So yeah, with regards to what I'm referring to there, really is that the climatologists, they're all saying that we've got to maintain below 2 degrees centigrade, otherwise our sort of capitalist environment starts to break down, and life as we know it, society and all the rest of it, has some major hurdles to jump. And at the same time, most people who are looking into this are saying, well, I really don't want to. I don't want to try and achieve this 2-degree centigrade rise, because by staying within that, I'm going to have to make some major changes to my lifestyle. So there's actually going to be changes anyway. So this tool is enabling, is the kind of the government's approach to work out what's the most important and where they should be putting their focus first to try and achieve all of these very tough goals. So it is a little bit. It's a bit controversial on the basis that, first of all, it's a model, and we all know how inaccurate and wildly unrelated to reality models are. But at the same time, most of the sort of climatologist fraternity believe that there's no chance of us achieving this. So it's nice to see a bit of a positive spin coming out from the government on that.
Ah, very good. Well done, the UK government.
I think it's David McKay as well, our chief scientist for the government, who's doing these sorts of works. Very, very smart bloke. Really enjoy listening to him talk.
Well, also out of the Department of Energy and Climate Change, on the 29th of January, was an article about energy trends and prices statistical release for the 29th of January 2015. It's got a rather wonderful list which gives a highlight of what happened in the last 3 months from September 2014 to November 2014 compared to the same period a year earlier. And these are some really interesting stuff here. Stop me when you want to make a comment, Kit, but I'm just going to read these out because they're great. Petrol and diesel prices down sharply, reflecting lower crude oil price. Okay. Primary energy consumption in the UK fell by 7.5%. On a temperature-adjusted basis, it fell by 5%. Primary energy consumption down 7.5%, Kit. Is that right?
Well, so that's exactly contradictory to what I said earlier, which is the energy prices are the energy consumption is rising. But I was talking globally. So what it's showing is the first signs that potentially the Western world is capable of curbing some of our consumption. It's rather promising, I think. I'm very happy to see it, because I think up until that point we'd seen, and it's a while since I read the statistic, but I think it was an average of 3.2% increase year-on-year consumption. So to see a decrease, I believe that's the first time. I might be wrong, but it's definitely promising.
It's got to be weather. Indigenous energy production fell by 3.4%, with nuclear power down 27% due to outages. Well, they were well publicised, the outages, and held up by publications like the Daily Mail as the sign of things to come, with the outages and fall off of nuclear power over the next 20 years. Lower coal generation due to the closure of plants. However, coal share now higher than gas as generators switch back to coal in response to increasing wholesale gas prices, and coal plants return to operation after summer outages. And in fact, that's a really good reminder, Kit, isn't it, that these electricity generating companies, they just produce what's cheapest.
Yeah, they absolutely prostitute themselves. It's all about the bottom line, and that was what I was trying to refer to when we were talking about how the electricity price does not directly relate to the price of fossil fuels. They hop around. So they were already, before the price of oil dropped, these guys were doing some hardcore shopping to get the best price on energy.
What do you think it is the amount in percentage terms of the electricity mix that came from nuclear?
Uh, I believe it was 18%
It's a
last
very
time.
good guess. It's actually 16.4%, which is much lower than it's
I should have read
traditionally
this,
been.
the line below. That would have
No,
been.
that's fine. That's fine. That's okay. That's added a bit of excitement to the show. Coal provided 34.6% of electricity generation by major power producers, with gas at 33.8% and nuclear at 16.4%. Wind generation by major power producers down 9% due to lower wind speeds, would you believe? Whilst overall renewables up 10.6% with growth in biomass. Remind us what biomass is, okay?
So this is the burning of anything that grows on short timescales. Basically, most any form of wood, grasses. People most commonly think, when they're thinking of biomass, refer to miscanthus grass, chips, pellets, and logs, which are all kind of woody matter. But there are quite a lot of other formats too. But there's been, with this increase in the use of biomass, in terms of centralized generation of electricity, there's been a lot of publications released around biomass being a bad thing, and for me, it's a bit of a nightmare. I agree with a lot that's being said around how biomass can be misused and sourced in a non-sustainable manner, but at the same time, if you are sensible in how you use biomass, it is a fabulous technology. But you see those, was it 2 weeks ago we were showing articles about how biomass is dirtier than coal. I hate that, because it is obviously it's a massive misrepresentation, and it is not it's saying that there is certain circumstances which, if abused to the extreme, you can create an extremely non-environmental scenario from. That is not the same as to say that, broadly speaking, biomass is dirtier than coal. That's just not the case.
Indeed, it's not. And the final point made in this report is that the low carbon share of electricity generation by major power producers was down 2.4 percentage points to 31.6% due to a fall in nuclear generation. Well, that just sounds like a load of old statistics and numbers to me. Moving on, this article is from phys.org. Public perception of man-made climate change is at a 10-year high, and apparently the British public's belief in the reality of climate change and its human causes rose last year following the winter floods, and is now at its highest since 2005, according to a new study. How important is people's beliefs, Kit, in this argument, setting aside the facts?
It's a difficult question to ask, really, because when you're looking at these things, you've got the people who are making the decisions, and how those folk with power are sort of shifting our future, and how that relates to the masses. There's definitely more capacity for the masses to affect change with social networking and all sorts of media-related demonstrations. So I would say it's absolutely a positive thing, and it certainly reflects a really low level, almost subconscious, but national feeling of unease moving forwards. So again, what that's showing is this bubbling to the surface, which is, I guess, it is the beginnings of a revolution, really, and I will probably live to see that in the next sort of 20 years. I'm expecting those sorts of major political shifts, and maybe even the kind of economic regimes that we walk under, that's going to be changing. So I think that's all a reflection of that. Complex subject, really interesting.
Well, interesting. You're talking about revolution, of course. One of the, as we run up to the election in May here in the UK, one of the things that was under scrutiny was the prime ministerial debates, and David Cameron wanted the Greens to be included. At first, we were thinking that the three major parties plus another party called the UKIP, who are essentially separatists, nationalists. But in terms of the number of votes that were garnered by these smaller parties, the next party up would be the Green Party, which have because of our first past the post system, only have one MP, but certainly have 5 to 10% of the vote. Now, obviously, that's not a revolution, and the strength of the Green Party in the UK is nothing compared to other countries in Europe, particularly Germany. But perhaps we're going to see some votes for the Green. They're certainly getting some serious coverage in this election run-up.
Yeah, and there's I think in terms of party loyalty, I think I was reading somewhere about that being at an all-time low. So it's probably the most exciting general election in many, I would say. So yeah, I would hope there's some changes at the top, although I'm not going to hold my breath.
New Scientist Opinion reported that over a barrel, falling oil prices and the environment. This article talks in some detail, which you're going to decode for us, Kit, about the effect of the falling oil price and its effect on the environment.
Yeah, great article, very high level, unfortunately. So it goes into a lot of detail. So in terms of, low level, yeah, depending on how you're looking at it, you need to have quite a background in it. To decode it, but effectively what it's saying is that, as you can read at the top there, halving of oil prices is hailed as good news for cash-strapped consumers, but is it going to basically take the momentum out of the green movement that we've all been working towards? So what he's attempting to break down here is the fact that there are lots of different reasons why the momentum will continue, and that OPEC's changes is not going to dampen huge portions of it. And it is really interesting, which I think you'll find on our Reddit if you want to have an actual deeper read. But otherwise, other than that, getting into any of the details quite complicated. Oh, there it is, over a barrel. Okay, should we move on from that one, Robin?
Yeah, why not? Full-time Whistle report this week that Britain's worst energy suppliers for customer satisfaction are... The very worst is Npower, which is rated for its complaint handling and customer service, coming in slightly ahead of Scottish Power and EDF, British Gas and E.ON. I'm an EDF customer. Their customer service is not great. And Scottish and Southern Energy, both having 50% approval ratings. The consumers in this trial, which came from Sky News, that ranked Ecotastic as the best supplier with a score of 84% customer satisfaction, followed by Good Energy, Abeco, OVO Energy, Utility Warehouse, and Flow Energy. All these smaller independent providers scored in the 70s and 80s. You heard of any of these, Kit?
I certainly have. I've been a big advocate of looking for alternative source of energy at the kind of economical level for a long time. I think it was somewhere in the region of 7 or 8 years ago. I was even trying to get my student house on EBI Co. And then I moved to Ecotastic and then to Good Energy. So my entire adult life has been using those top 3 ranked companies right there. So I'm very, very pleased to see that ratified. But yes, the main point was that the only reason I moved from Ecotastic to Good Energy was on the basis that Good Energy did 100% renewable electricity, whereas Ecotastic is only in the region of, I think last time I checked, was 56% renewables. So yeah, it was just taking it that one step further. But great companies, all of them, yeah.
Well, I've considered moving to Ecotastic, and I haven't moved yet, and I really should. But I do use them. They have their electricity highway in the UK, where they have 100 amp fast chargers using the Charlie Mo system at motorway service stations, which is provided free of charge. No charge at all, no yearly rental. You just need a card. In fact, I don't even think you need a card anymore. You just need to plug in and off you go. That they give that away for free because the CEO believes that's the right thing to do. He wants to kickstart it. He isn't in cahoots with anyone. He just believes in it, and it's nice to see that sort of that sort of philosophy informing corporate decision making rather than the usual bean counting.
Isn't it interesting that the big six are exclusively the six worst, basically?
Yeah, that was funny. I suppose you could argue that any incumbent is sort of stuck with the old systems that it's had for 20, 30, 50 years. And newer players have got the opportunity, for example, to use newer IT. But I think it's not just, new IT and new processes and new dynamic workforces. It's actually a new philosophy. As you said, Ecotricity, Good Energy, Abeco, they're all focused on the renewable.
Yeah, it's a really nice movement. It's simple, easy, and although it's not a huge effect on the environment, based on the fact that this is effectively carbon offsetting, I wouldn't even think about it. Just flip over as soon as you can.
Good and wise advice. ArbTech report about cracking the fracking, everything you need to know, fabulous infographics, not really reporting, but I'm just going to put it up on the screen, Kit, and let's find out how fracking works in the most simple way with a visual aid. I'm really sorry if you're on the podcast. I will try and commentate to fill in the gaps here, but there's a really beautiful infographic that Kit's going to take us through on cracking the fracking.
Yeah, so this was when I was looking for fracking and trying to explain it to people, this was about as sort of comprehensive as I found, and it was very nicely broken down as to what you're trying to look at. And it's basically, it starts by defining the difference between conventional gas and unconventional gas. So things that are really difficult to get hold of: coal bed methane, shale gas, tight gas, those are difficult to reach. They use a lot more energy to do so, and there's a lot more impact in terms of the locality in getting hold of it, as opposed to a nicely, highly pressurized pond of the stuff to tap into. So
this is rather nice here. 1 Darcy. What's that?
Yeah, this is permeability. So this is basically this is talking about bedrock and how you need to get the permeability up of that rock to get access to this unconventional gas, which is all locked away. So it's going from 1 nanodarcy to 1 microdarcy to 1 millidarcy up to 1 darcy, and once you get over the millidarcy range, you're then getting into conventional gas side of things. So it's saying that salt, if you try and bring stuff through salt, it's ridiculously tight, whereas a brick is a bit more porous. And unconventional gas is like getting it out of rock, which is more porous than a brick. So here's another infographic looking at how you get a hold of these different sources of energy, where it's tapping into the different strata layers beneath, and what's actually being required to get hold of it. And interestingly, it talks about reservoir seals, groundwater, and so you can start to get an idea as to its potential knock-on effects of getting hold of this stuff.
Now, it's interesting that tight gas comes from sandstone. The implication is there that fracking is not required in tight gas. You've just got to hit the field.
Yes, but I'm guessing it's more difficult to locate and get hold of, but also I think it's to do with the permeability. You still have to affect the permeability. You need to move it up on the Darcy scale. So there is more involved there, but I think it goes through that later on. So it's now starting to describe the drill process of how you set up a fracked well. So it's talking about drilling down, creating perforations, pressurizing with a particular type of cocktail of chemicals, which then pumps at high pressure into the rock, cracks it apart, and then allows gas to come back out of it, back up the way that it went down in the first place.
Okay, so the gun fires through the holes, the water, sand, and chemicals are pumped in at high pressure to create the rock fractures, and then the sand is left in fractures to keep them open as the pump pressure is removed, allowing the oil and gas to flow up.
Yeah, I believe actually the history behind it was it's actually a lot of it's coming from technology used in drilling muds, which is common in exploration for oil and gas, and that they're using these muds, these chemical cocktails to improve the yields and the ability to access this unconventional gas. So what you're seeing there, there's another infographic now on the page which talks about the history of it.
Whoa! Sorry, carry on, Kit.
That's a major zoom out on it. Okay, so yeah, the history of it. So it's looking at where it first appeared and at what scale. So it looks at how we move through conventional gas and then into unconventional gas, and how we were getting hold of it. You know, it started back in the day. The fluid that we were using was napalm. That's what we were pumping down into the into the ground.
That was in 1947 before they realised napalm not so good. What is slick water, Kit? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, that's the cocktail that I'm talking about.
Oh,
that's what it's dubbed as.
Slick water, yeah. I'll order one of those next time I'm out on a Friday night. So here's some description of how much is there to be fracked, and it talks about 4.4 billion barrels of shale oil in the Weald Basin of Sussex, 1,300 TCF total cubic feet? No, trillion cubic feet under the Bowland Shale in Lancashire, and 80 trillion cubic feet under the Midland Valley in Scotland. So we've already found these locations where this gas can be fracked. Why aren't we just digging it out of the ground then?
Well, on the basis that the process, as we've just described, is both incredibly difficult and energy intensive to get set up, because we're an incredibly urbanized island, of which most people are extremely uncomfortable about the potential effects and locality. This is not, this is not the wastes of Nebraska or Alaska, where there's just a few people for the entire landmass of the UK size. So when things go wrong, it's a very intimate environment for it to be happening. So it talks through now, as you can see, things like the seismic concerns and the greenhouse gas emissions. One of the most interesting developments on the fracking side of things is that the quantity of gas that it releases, 10% of it is lost directly into the atmosphere, down to the fact that this fracking effects is difficult to control and keep a cap on, and those escaping gases multiply the effect, or the negative effect on the environment, way past any benefit that's gained from utilizing gas over coal, even as a dirty source of energy. So
this is really interesting here. It says one shale gas well has been tested in the UK. 52,000 shale gas wells have been drilled in the US. The issue there being that they don't need to disclose because of what was his name? That vice president.
George Bush, actually.
George Bush is vice president.
He signed in a loophole to the legislation so that they didn't have to conform to the Clean Air Act or the Clean Water Acts of the US, and also that they didn't need to disclose their methodologies for accessing this. So basically, it's a completely unlegislated industry.
And the final here, infographic talks 29% of people support fracking, 42% people support nuclear energy, and 80% of people support renewable energy. Well, we all support renewable energy. I support fracking and I support nuclear, because until we've got that wonderful cold fusion device in our fridges, which heats our entire house with no environmental benefits, we're going to have to burn hydrocarbons. I'd rather it was gas than oil. And the same with nuclear, provided I know that it's got a long-term environmental effect, but we have to have energy. It's a good thing to do with the planet, to create energy. I know, Kit, that you are from the different end of the spectrum. Let's hear your side of this.
Well, I mean, I think there's always going to have to be, or at least for the foreseeable, there's going to have to be a mix of energy sources to enable us to fulfill what we require. But I think that firstly, the planet is getting into a very grotesque form of consumption, and I think that before we actually have a debate about energy, we should be debating about why our lives need to be so consumer-based. I think that's a much higher level societal question, which is really important. It's quite a sickness, a sort of a self-centered sickness that we seem to be suffering from, and the the reality is that I just can't understand when you know that fracking is going to be releasing huge portions of methane in terms of our environment, in terms of even if you take the fact that fracking is a good thing or a bad thing, and you take that totally out of the discussion, what I can't sort of comprehend is this idea that we have limits within which we need to live, and those limits are going to be blown out of the water if we continue on this tract of releasing million-year-old carbon into an environment which is self-contained. We are a bubble. We are an atmosphere containing a finite, environment, which if you keep on pumping into, it will change. You will shift things. So fracking, the sole reason why you should be absolutely against fracking is the basis that by going to it, it allows us to maintain the status quo for that bit longer, which makes it that bit more impossible to deviate from catastrophes in the future, which your children are going to be sort of suffering under.
Wise words. Our final article is from Reuters, a cheery little number entitled "Sea Level Rise Quickens More Than Thought in Threat to Coasts." I shouldn't laugh. Reuters are reporting that in the past 2 decades, sea level rises, the rise in sea levels has accelerated faster than previously thought, in a sign of climate change threatening coasts from Florida to Bangladesh. A study released on Wednesday has reported that reassessing records from more than 600 tidal gauges found that readings from 1901 to 1990 had overestimated the rise in sea levels. Based on the revised figures for those years, the acceleration was therefore, as a result, greater than so far assumed.
25% it's showing there.
That's a lot, isn't it? And rise in sea levels, why is that such a bad thing?
Well, we're already increasing population to the point where land masses are being busted, whether it's land used for the obvious nature of houses, etc., or whether it's there to service us by producing food, or whether it's there to mount PV panels onto. We need land, we're short of it in particular areas, often the areas that are going to be worse hit by sea level rise are some of the places where we need land the most. So there's going to be quite a few issues there.
Well, that's a cheery note to end on. No Tech Corner this week. We'll get more into that next week, and I know that some of you have asked for more home-focused technology stuff. I think we actually, because of our 2-week break there, Kit, we went crazy on climate science.
Yeah, news mad.
News and politics and science and you name it, you've had it all in one 35-minute slug here on Ecotastic this week. That's all, as Kit referred to earlier. We do have a subreddit, ecotastic.reddit.com, where you can vote our stories up and down. You can find us on YouTube and Feedburner, but since you're listening to this already, you probably know how to find us, so pointless mentioning that. That's all for this week. Thanks for your contribution this week, Kit.
Thank you, Robin. It's been a pleasure.
It certainly has. So it's goodbye from Kit and goodbye from me, and we'll see you next time.